Dear listeners, as we gather for this episode of Hikes and Mics, our hearts are heavy with the recent events unfolding in Southern California. The devastating wildfires have ravaged beloved landscapes, destroyed homes, and most tragically claimed lives. To all those affected, the families mourning loved ones, individuals who lost their homes, and communities facing the aftermath, we extend our deepest sympathies and unwavering support. The magnitude of this disaster is profound. In these trying times, it's essential to come together as a community. Many of you have reached out asking how you can assist those impacted. Please check out the episode show notes to learn more about how you can help out the individuals and communities impacted by these fires. To those on the front lines, the brave firefighters, first responders, and volunteers, your courage and dedication do not go unnoticed. Your tireless efforts to protect our communities and natural spaces are deeply appreciated. In the face of such adversity, it's natural to feel overwhelmed. Remember, it's okay to seek support, lean on one another, and take time to heal. Our trails and mountains have always been symbols of resilience and strength. Together as a community, we will navigate this challenging path and emerge stronger. Stay safe, take care of each other, and let's continue to support those in need during this critical time. Welcome everyone to the Hikes and Mics podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey, connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the United States and beyond. Throughout these winter months, we've had the privilege of conversing with remarkable individuals. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. In this episode of Hikes and Mics, we're joined by Charles Graves, a dedicated high pointer and global adventurer currently based in Japan. From climbing his first peak in Southern California as a kid to summiting Mount Fuji and tackling the Crown of Europe challenge, Charles shares his passion for exploring the world's highest points, one summit at a time. We dive into his experiences hiking across Montana's rugged backcountry, surviving an intense failed attempt at Granite Peak, and completing the 52-hike challenge in some of the toughest conditions. He also shares insights into Japan's hiking scene, from its well-marked trails to the breathtaking waterfalls of Okinawa. Plus, Charles breaks down his Asian Peak Trilogy goal and his next big adventure in Vietnam. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Charles. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mics podcast. I have a really special guest with me today. He's coming from across the Pacific in the beautiful country of Japan. His name is Charles Graves, and he's going to be sharing about his experiences both in the United States and in Japan and in Europe as well. Charles, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We always like to start off by asking our guests to share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Hey, thanks, Ivan. Thanks for having me. My name's Charles. I was born in Oceanside, California, so San Diego County, and I've pretty much been hiking my whole life. Earliest memory that I have was when I was 3 or 4 years old. My dad took us out to this one spot. It was like this hill you could see from our backyard. We just called it the bump. This was back in the days before like GPS. So we just like tried finding it manually, just driving around until we found the hill. And then we tried climbing up it. And I just remember like I was having a blast, like just trying my hardest to get to the top as we're like slipping down the gravel and whatever. But yeah, that's my earliest memory of hiking. Loved it ever since and kept on it for the last 20 years.
I've been to SoCal now as an adult and kind of experienced the hiking scene in and around Los Angeles County. But how would you describe the hiking scene growing up in Southern California?
Oh, the Southern California hiking scene was amazing. Like it's kind of weird having like growing up in the city, people don't really like talk to each other as much or whatever. But when you're out on the trails, especially like in Southern California, like everyone will just stop to like say hi or see how your day's going or have a little conversation back and forth. So I was really blessed to be able to grow up with that and just going through it with my dad. We would go out every weekend, like on Saturdays or whatever, and we just find a new place to hike and climb a mountain or whatever and say what's up to all the people along the way.
And was there any specific trails or regions that you frequented or enjoyed going back to?
Growing up, I was a really big mountain climber with my dad, like peak bagger or whatever you want to call it. So the first big milestone was when I was 8 years old. It was in Idlewild. We did Mount San Jacinto. And ever since then, it's kind of held a place in my heart because from my backyard, that was the most prominent mountain you could see from it. So like just growing up, I'd always see it out in the distance. And then to finally be able to do it and look back and be like, yeah, I climbed that. Like that always makes me feel kind of special, like knowing I did it with my dad and brother.
Oh, for sure, man. And at 8 years old, I mean, that's a significant elevation gain. Right on, man. So I got to ask, because we're recording this in the middle of winter, how was your fall and early winter hiking season? Any memorable destination or hikes?
Yeah, so right now I currently live on an island, Okinawa, Japan. It's kind of like the equivalent to Hawaii in the States. So it doesn't really feel like fall out here. Like it's still pretty warm, like, 70s, occasionally 80s. But one thing about the fall season here is it's the monsoon season. So it's really rainy. And one thing that a lot of islands are known for is their waterfalls. And of course, you mix rain with waterfalls and like they're incredible out here. Like I've never seen anything like it before. So there's 7 or 8 pretty big falls around the island. So this whole fall experience, like I just been going out trying to find these places when it rains.
And I got to ask, because you're the first guest that I think has some significant experience there hiking in and around Japan. What's the hiking scene like there in Okinawa, but also in Japan?
So the hiking scene overall is pretty good. The Japanese people are like extremely polite and friendly. So when we're doing hikes around here, like climbing the mountains or hills or whatever you want to call it, they're always super nice and happy to help us by or, take pictures for us at the top. So it's really big experience, like getting to meet these people. It's just a little hard to communicate just because of the language barrier. So Japanese is really hard for me to learn compared to some of the other languages. So thank you, hello, and excuse me. That's kind of my go-tos on it.
And Charles, there in your local trail systems, are they easily marked or is there a little bit of bushwhacking in order to reach some of these waterfalls?
So some of them, you have to do a little bit of bushwhacking, like especially here, like it's a jungle environment. So a lot of the stuff will get overgrown pretty easy. But for the most part, the more popular trails, like they're very easily identifiable. Like they'll even rope it off so that it's impossible to get lost. And that's kind of a theme that I've noticed throughout the couple places I've been through in Asia is the more popular trails. Like there will be a ton of people that'll do it. Like you even have to get permits for it. And like there'll be roped off sections. And even occasionally there'll be kind of like these gates that you have to go through just to manage the amount of people going through these hikes.
That kind of leads to my next question, Charles, is do you have any tips or advice for hikers that are interested in visiting Japan and getting some hikes in while they're visiting?
I would definitely say make sure you have Google Translate and All Trails because it's really easy to miss a section, like especially when like you can't read where it's going unless you know the language. And other than that, I just say like be expected to have like pretty crowded trails, like especially a lot in Asia. A lot of people tend to hike. Like from little kids to the elderly, like it's pretty common out here. It's rare that you'll do one of these hikes and you'll be by yourself. So I'd say that's just one thing to expect if you're going to be coming out here and traveling, hiking around.
I got to ask, because you've been able to explore the country a little bit. Do you have any favorite hikes or trails that you've been able to complete in Japan?
Yes. So all the waterfall trails, like I've yet to do a single one that I haven't enjoyed. And there's a couple high point places that are right on the coast that just overlook the entire island. And it's pretty crazy, like having that feeling, just having a full 360 from like coast to coast, like seeing everything on the East China Sea to the Pacific Sea. Like, it's a pretty special feeling. There's a couple mountains like Mount Katsu and Mount Awadaki, which overlook the entire island. And funny enough, the highest point on the island, it's kind of like in a jungly area. So when I reached the summit of it, it was just surrounded by the jungle canopy. So it was a little disappointing, but like it's still a high point.
So there was no view? You were just still in the canopy when you summited?
Yep. Like it took me a couple of times going back and forth, having to use a topographical map till like I finally found the spot. And then I was like, well, it's the highest point on the mountain at least.
Well, talk about iconic summits. you were able to knock a big icon when it comes to mountains here in the Pacific region, and that's Mount Fuji. How was it summiting that mountain?
Mount Fuji was definitely insane. Like, that's probably one of the most famous mountains in the world, and like for good reason. So the day I did it, it was the last weekend of the season. So that was going to be my last chance to do it. And it happened to be like right when I got to Japan. So I got here in August, and I believe it was Labor Day weekend. So I booked a flight, went out there with my buddy Eddie, and then we just full sent it just in one day. And the thing about that mountain is there's no other high point. Like, it's just a prominent peak by itself. So the entire time when we're hiking up, like, you could just see the entirety of Japan, basically. And then for us, like, once we got a little over halfway, it was pretty cloudy and foggy. And then once we reached the summit, like, it was just a sea of clouds, and it was like an unreal experience.
And like, how difficult is the climb? Because like, we have Mount Rainier here in Washington State that you can drive up to, I forget if it's like 6,000, 7,000 feet, and then you hike the, remaining 6,000 to 7,000 feet. How is it in Japan with Mount Fuji?
So with Mount Fuji, we just took public transportation the entire way. So as soon as we landed in the airport in Tokyo, we hopped on a bullet train, took it hour and a half, 2 hours south to the city of Fuji, got a hotel, and luckily, like, it's pretty popular out there. So a lot of the hotels like already have like shuttles and stuff that'll take you to the base of the mountain. And Mount Fuji has like 7 or 8 different trails that you could go up the top. So the hotel that we got, it was the shortest trail, but it was the steepest one. And that one was definitely a struggle, but we made it up. Like, I definitely probably would have preferred a 7-8 miler with a gradual incline than just straight up.
Do you remember the elevation gain on that?
Yeah, I think it was 4,500, and it was 2.5 miles up. So you could just do the math on that one.
Oh my gosh, that is wild.
Yeah, they have a funny saying out here where a wise man will climb Mount Fuji once and a fool will climb it twice. And after doing it, I can kind of agree on it.
Now, with Mount Fuji, do you need any mountaineering experience, or a person that's anywhere from an intermediate to advanced hiker able to summit it?
I think pretty much anybody could summit it. So they have different huts leading up to the summit, and it's meant for people to, spend the night and then catch the sunrise. So I wanted to do it all in one day just because we had that weekend to do it. But there were plenty of other people that were taking their time, slowly working their way up. And then if you need that night to recover, then there's plenty of options. I think there was like 7 or 8 different huts on the way up. And for a 2.5 mile trail, like, that's quite a bit.
Being based out of Japan, I think it serves as a great launch pad to other nearby countries in the Eastern Pacific and even to Europe. Have there been any other memorable hikes that you've been able to complete on that side of the Pacific?
Yes. So on my Christmas break, I went out to Korea and I just did the highest point of Korea. It's called Mount Hallasan. So it's not on the main side of Korea. It's on an island a little bit south of it called Jeju. And yeah, so Christmas Eve, I summited that one.
And I think I remember seeing the picture, like, it was fully covered in snow. How was it trekking up in the snow?
It wasn't too bad. So like I said, all the trails they're managed really well out here. So to even attempt it, you needed to have crampons or some kind of spikes on your boots. So I went out to a local like outdoor store and then bought one that I just slipped over my boot and then went all the way up it. I think it was about 12 miles, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think the only thing that made it a little rough was I went from the airport straight to the trailhead and then just went up from there. So I didn't really have a chance to recuperate.
That kind of leads me to my next question, because, high points have been something that you've been able to check off on your hiking list. On your Instagram profile, it lists a few of the quests that you're currently on. One of them being the Asian Peak Trilogy Challenge, the other one, the Crown of Europe Challenge, and then also the United States High Point list. Can you share a little bit about the Asian Peak Trilogy and then the Crown of Europe, what those challenges are?
So the Asian Peak Trilogy is basically like the three main summits in different countries surrounding Asia. So it's Mount Fuji, the one in Taiwan, and then the other one in Malaysia. And honestly, like I just kind of wanted to see if there was any challenges since I'm going to be living out here for the next 2 years. And that was the first one that popped up. And yeah, luckily I was able to start it with Mount Fuji. And then going back to the Crown of Europe, that was again another one. I was living out of Turkey, and after about like 5 or 6 months, I just kind of got the itch to travel, and I wanted to do the highest point in Turkey, but that one I wasn't allowed to go just because it's a rough place to be in at this point. And I kind of like shifted a little bit further west to some of the other countries there. And through my research on some of these mountains and trails, I was able to find that there was a challenge called the Crown of Europe that somebody had attempted, and they actually completed it while I was starting it up. So it's just kind of like another challenge. I'm a big high pointer kind of guy. So like I love just climbing mountains, getting to the highest points, and then having a challenge to kind of go along with it. You know, it kind of motivates me and makes me want to like challenge myself and, you know, get these things knocked out. And then before that, obviously I was living in the States. So I started with Mount Whitney in California, and then slowly just started knocking some of them off in the West.
You know, I got to ask, because you've been able to share on Instagram some of the high points that you've been able to check off the list. What have been some memorable summits outside of Mount Fuji, whether in Europe or in the United States?
So Mount Olympus in Greece is definitely another one. That was definitely one of the harder ones that I've done. And also like, it's one of the more famous ones too. Like if you would have asked me if I was 12 years old, if I was going to climb Mount Olympus, I probably would have thought you were making it up. Like I didn't even know it was a real place until, 10 years ago or something. So yeah, that was definitely a memorable one. The one in Bulgaria, that one was probably the most fun out of all of them. You had a cool cable car that takes you up about like halfway. And then just the trail was beautiful, perfect conditions. It wasn't too hard, but it was like difficult enough to kind of have that like satisfying feeling when you get to the top. And then obviously Mount Whitney too. That's the highest one I've ever done. And the hardest, hands down, has been Granite Peak in Montana. That one's no joke.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to another quest that you've been able to complete, and that's the 52 Hike Challenge. And one of the times you did it there in Montana. And I think when it comes to like outdoor recreation, places like Colorado, Utah come to mind, the Pacific Northwest, but I think Montana holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts when it comes to, hiking, backpacking. How was it living and spending time on the Montana trails? And what were some of the highlights on completing the 52 Hike Challenge in that iconic state?
So just to clarify, I've only done the 52 Hike Challenge once. I've attempted it a couple times. So actually, the first time I attempted it was the year it came out, and I didn't even mean to try. Like I was telling you, I was training for Mount Whitney growing up when I was like 14 or 15 years old. So like I had a list of hikes that slowly progressively got harder. Yeah, like I just posted on my Instagram, and then I think I got tagged in the 52 Hike Challenge. I'm like, oh, I got like 14 or 15 of these things knocked out already. Like might as well go for all of them. And then halfway through, I fractured my ankle, so I wasn't able to do it. So fast forward 7-8 years, right before I was going overseas, I was like, man, I got to get this thing knocked out. Like I tried it twice before, and I was like, all right, I'm dead set on it this year. Like I'm going to do the 52 Hike Challenge. Like I don't care what it takes. And I happen to be living in Montana at that point. So part of why I wanted to do it outside of the reason that I was leaving was obviously like living in a place for 4 years. Like you build friendships, you have family, and, it just kind of starts to become home. And then once you leave, like it's kind of, it's a little bit like saddening leading up to that point. So what I did to kind of help like ease the transition into moving was doing the 52 Hike Challenge. Because along with that, I ended up having to break up with my girlfriend just because where I was going to be moving to, like she wasn't going to be able to come with. There was a lot of internal struggle with that. And what helped me cope with it healthily was hiking. So the 52 hike challenge in Montana was definitely a struggle starting on January 1st, because obviously the snow was the biggest struggle that I'd ever encountered before. Because like it's not just, like a light sprinkle or whatever. Like there would be times like I'll be like knee deep in some of this stuff, just trying to power through it and make it through the trail. But overall, like I don't regret anything. Like at the time I didn't enjoy it, but like afterwards, like it was pretty fulfilling. It was like, dang, I actually did that. So,
Charles, I mean, we can't talk about Montana without talking about Glacier National Park. And I know that came up on your feed a few times. How was it visiting that park?
So Glacier is beautiful. Like that's probably the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. Like the going to the Sun Road and stopping at the top, especially on a clear day, it's something that like you can't compare to anything else. And like I've been to 3 continents, like over 10 countries, and that still holds up there compared to everything else I've seen. So Glacier is definitely on a whole nother level. And I feel like it's kind of overshadowed too from Yellowstone, because everybody knows about Yellowstone and it's kind of like right there, like 3-4 hours away, combines with Wyoming and Montana. But yeah, and then like when you bring up Glacier, like to people out of town or just, not from that area, they've never even heard of it before. I'm just like, what the heck? Like you guys need to check this place out. Like, it's insane.
You mentioned that Granite Peak was one of the more difficult summits to reach. What about that hike made it so hard?
So I was young and reckless, and I had a high ego coming off of Mount Whitney, because I did Mount Whitney when I was 17 by myself. And in my head, I was like, oh, Granite Peak's only 12,000 feet. And Mount Whitney was 14. Like, I got this, like I got this without a doubt. So first time I attempted it, I did a little bit of research. I watched a few YouTube videos and I thought I had a good understanding of it until I was on it. Like I did not bring enough food. I did not bring enough water. And I got to the point where I ran out, but I was so close that I just kept pushing it. And what made me turn around was I started hearing like thunderheads going off. And Granite Peak isn't one of those mountains, like it doesn't have a trail that goes all the way to the top. It has a trail that goes about halfway up. You go across this plateau and then it kind of turns into like a scramble / like rock climbing. If you're on that without any gear, like ropes or harnesses or anything, when it's raining, like it's pretty much a death sentence. So I had to like tuck my pride away and like turn around and start heading back. And then as I was heading back, that's when the rain hit me pretty hard. And that's when my body kind of reached its maximum potential. Like my legs started cramping really bad and it got to the point where I could barely even stand up. And luckily there was another hiker there. It was a group of 4 or 5. His name was Paul, but he kind of saw the condition I was in and he helped get me to a nearby tent. I don't even know whose tent it was at the time, because he knew like if I would have stayed here on this plateau, like I probably would have died. But yeah, he helped me get to this tent and then gave me some extra food, gave me some extra water, just like told me like, hey, wait this out. Whenever the people come back, whoever owns this tent, like just tell them what's going on. And yeah, just take whatever time you need, because like you need to get off this mountain. Like if you try to even make it back, like you're going to get hypothermia. Yeah. Like at that point, like I'm sure I was delirious and all that stuff. Like I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. So I was like, all right, you know what? You're right. I just need to sit down, wait this out, and then get off this mountain. It ended up stopping raining for the whole night. Like the people ended up coming back who owned the tent, and I kind of explained to them like what was going on. So they were cool with me staying there. They were probably a little upset that I got a bunch of their stuff wet, but they understood what was happening. So it ended up raining all night, and then 6 a.m. the next day, it cleared up, and then I was able to get off the mountain. So yeah, that was definitely a struggle. Like don't let pride get to your head, and don't let inexperience, like take the time you need to do the research on whatever mountain trail you're doing, and don't end up in those kind of situations. So I took about a month off and then went back to it, and then I was able to accomplish it at the end of August.
Yeah, man, that's big, because sometimes, those moments in the outdoors where you kind of push yourself to your limits can either, scare people off from attempting it again. But I think you were able to learn from the experience, and the fact that you're able to go a month later and summit it must have been a huge reward for you.
It just loomed over me. Like I needed to do it. Like I could not get it off my mind. Like that's one of my biggest passions is doing high points. And yeah, like after failing that one, I just could not stop thinking about it. So then I went back, learned from my lessons from the past, and then got it done.
You know, you've mentioned it already, and one of the segments that we like to do on the podcast is do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram feed and ask them about a particular post or reel. And, you know, you summiting Mount Whitney at 17 caught my attention because you mentioned that you solo summited. How did that trek kind of come about? And like, how did you decide to ultimately do it solo rather than with a group?
So I had attempted it with my dad and uncle growing up. We made 2 attempts at it. I think I was 13 or 14. And both times, like we couldn't do it. Like we either ran out of time or like, you know, it was just way in over our heads. Like we just couldn't handle it. So I had to remember, like I had made it my goal to get it done before I graduated high school. And every single year after that, like it would just, there'd be a reason like we couldn't do it, whether it was like, you know, someone's graduating, so they come a little bit early, like in May or June when there's still too much snow to attempt it. Or like I said, I fractured my ankle when I was 15. And that was kind of like the last year that we could have attempted it, like myself, my dad and my uncle. And, you know, just kind of life happens. Like my dad started a business and then, you know, my uncle stopped coming around as often. So like I just kind of ran out of people to hike with. And then the thought kind of just occurred to me, like why do I need people to go hiking with? Like I could just go by myself. I did one solo hike by myself at 17 and it went well, and then slowly just kind of started picking up. So leading up to Mount Whitney, there was another challenge in Southern California called the SoCal Six Pack. Just like 6 mountains that slowly progressively get harder and harder leading up to, it's called San Gorgonio. It's the highest mountain in Southern California, but it's just another one of those challenges, like along with the 52 hike challenge. Like it's just something to encourage people like to get to do. You get a little patch too if you sign up for it and accomplish it. So I kind of did that one to help like train myself up for it. And then at the end of the summer, I remember it was 2 days before the first day of senior year, I set off by myself. I drove all the way like 4 hours north, and then I got it all done in one day at 17.
Wow. And I mean, we've had several guests that have summited Whitney, and it's one of the few mountains where I think everyone has experienced or have seen someone experience issues with the altitude. Back when you did it in 2017, did you have any issues with the altitude, or did you see anybody at the summit that was having issues?
I personally didn't. I know when I was doing some research for it, a couple weeks prior, there was some people that I think they got pretty bad case of altitude sickness, and they ended up like sliding down one of the glaciers. Because when you do it earlier in the year, there's still so much snow that you can't take the 99 switchbacks. You have to go up the snow face. And yeah, there was some people that I think they might have gotten dizzy or just like, you know, loss of balance, and it caused them to slip down. So that kind of worried me. But like I said, when I was younger, what my dad did to help us kind of acclimate for it was do these mountains that are over 10,000 feet. So you kind of get your body used to it. And the SoCal Six Pack Challenge, that kind of leads right into it. You start with like a 6,000 foot mountain, then 7,500, then 10, 11, and then leading all the way up to Mount Whitney, which is 14.5. So obviously it's still physically going to be a struggle. Just, you know, 22 miles and 7,500 feet of elevation, like that's going to make anybody tired. But I never got to the point where I was like scared for my life that I was going to like pass out or something.
Props to you, Charles, man. 17. Summiting Mount Whitney, that's an accomplishment. And do you think that's what kind of set you off on the high pointing? Is, you know, you're able to cross off the tallest mountain in the continuous United States, and did that kind of set you off on doing other high points?
Oh, 100%. Because after that one, like that kind of sets the bar pretty high. And a couple years after that, I joined the Air Force, and then like I got stationed in Montana. So there was like a period where I wasn't hiking anymore, but like I kept having this itch to like want to do something. I was like, I set the bar too high. So then I just kind of thought like of alternative ways of like get that fulfillment that I had when I was 17. And then that's when I found out about the state high points. points. I'm like, okay, like that seems doable. I did the one in Montana. I was like, all right, what's the next one? Next closest one was in Idaho, then South Dakota, then North Dakota. Yeah, like every single time, like I just got that feeling, and it's really cool, like traveling to these new places and meeting new people, and you'll find a lot of other people who have the same goals as you that are wanting to do these state high points, and they're like, yeah, what number are you on? I'm like, oh, I'm on number 5. It's like, oh, I'm 27 in right now. It's like, it's a really cool, like, I guess, sub community inside of the hiking community.
No, for sure. It's a growing community. There's been a lot of people I've come across that are checking off their high points in their region and setting off on the quest to do all 50 states. That's pretty great, man. 17 and then kicking off the journey that you're on now. You know, that was it for the regular questions, Charles. These last couple questions are questions that we like to ask all our guests. And I'm interested in hearing your response to this one, because I feel like some hikers have a regular summit routine, or it's a end of the hike routine. For many, it's packing a favorite snack or drink, maybe a moment of zen, or a favorite meal afterwards. Is there a regular custom or routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or when you make it back out?
Yes, a summit brewski is my go-to. I picked up on it doing my Crown of Europe challenge. Those, like I said, one of the interesting people I met. I saw him at the top of Serbia. He was drinking a beer. He offered me one. And then ever since then, like, it just kind of became a tradition. So like wherever I travel to, I'll stop at like a gas station or something and then just grab an interesting looking can. And once I get to the top, if it's not too cold, then yeah, I'll have a little victory beer.
This next one's about your pack list. I feel like sometimes people like to pack a luxury item that falls outside of the essentials that either brings them comfort or joy. Is there anything in your pack list that you would consider your luxury item?
I wouldn't really call it a luxury item. It's just kind of like something I'll bring along just to have like a kind of consistency. So part of when I reach a high point of a country, I will always bring an American flag with me to fly at the top. Again, that's something I picked up from the high point. Like, you'll see people from all these other countries, like they'll bring their flags and take a picture at the top. So then I got the idea to do it too. And something that it kind of like makes me feel like a little special about is a lot of these people that I'll meet on these different like travels, like they've never met an American before. And like, to me, it kind of like makes me feel, you know, like an ambassador almost. Like I am their first encounter of like an American. And like, I want to set a good example, you know, like kind of just be something that like, you know, you don't typically like see in the media or whatever, you know, just like set a good example and represent my country. I know it's kind of like a little cliche patriotic thing or whatever, but like, honestly, it's true. So yeah, carrying that flag and then, you know, being able to represent it, like give a good representation of who we are. Like I'd say that probably brings me the most comfort.
That's awesome, man. And yeah, I'm starting to see more and more, especially on some of the high points, people waving their flags, whether it's, you know, their country flag, state flag. I've even seen college flags or football teams. That's really great. And the great thing is most of those flags are lightweight. Some would consider ultralight. Now, we're recording this at the beginning of 2025. Charles, you know, we still got much of the year ahead of us. Are there any hiking goals or upcoming summits for the year that you're going to tackle?
Yes, I am going to try to knock out the rest of the Asian Trilogy. But before that, I want to do the highest point in Vietnam. So that's going to be my next goal. Just because right now there's still a little too much snow on the other two. So I just figured something to try to knock out in the meantime will be the Vietnam mountain. It's called Phantapan, and it's the highest mountain in Indochina. So that's going to be the next goal. It's got a cool little cable cart that takes you up most of the way too. I think it's the longest cable cart in the world. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. I'm interested in seeing the pictures once you summit it, because I've heard really beautiful things about the hiking scene in and around Vietnam. Now, this last bit of the podcast, Charles, are the this or that questions, and we did do some updates for season 9. I'm going to ask you 10 hiking related questions, and you just choose which one you prefer out of the two. And if you can't choose, you can say both or even neither. But the first one is, when it comes to trail snacks, do you prefer sweet or savory?
I'm definitely a savory kind of guy, 100%. It just hits different on the trails. Like, I don't know. I can't explain it.
No, for sure. Different snacks hit differently on the trail. I'll agree to that. And this next one, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to it, but waterfalls or summits?
You already know, like I kind of revolve my life around the summit routine. But, you know, being on an island, I've definitely grown to appreciate waterfalls a lot more. But I wouldn't trade it for summits any day.
And you've done both of these, and you had experience with both of them, but switchbacks are straight up.
I'm taking the switchbacks. Like, straight up, I know you get there quicker, but yeah, if I could take the easier trail and like just, you know, cost time versus energy, like I'll spend all day on those switchbacks. I got nothing to prove. Like, give me the easiest trail.
And then our most controversial one, trek poles or freehand.
On any given day, I will prefer to use trek poles, you know, kind of save the knees, a little bit of pain. But there are sometimes like the trail might be a little too steep that you might have to freehand it. But 9 times out of 10, I'll use trek poles.
And this next one's about your footwear. Do you wear trail runners or traditional hiking boots?
I will always use boots. I've used trail runners a couple times, and there's definitely been a couple close calls with the rolling of the ankles. It is pretty good for like rivers and stuff, but overall, I think I'd have to go with the boots.
And this next one's about trail systems. Do you prefer a loop trail or an out and back trail?
I think I'd have to say the out and back trail. I think I like the idea of a loop better, but what I've always noticed about like out and back trails is you'll completely miss something on your way to the destination that you had no idea that was there the whole time. Like once you turn around, like you'll get a different perspective. So yeah, I'd have to say out and back.
And then group hikes or solo adventures?
I'd have to say group hikes. Well, I know I do a lot of solo adventures. That's honestly just because like it's kind of hard to find people with the same mentality that I do. But anytime I do get to have like go out on a trip with a group of people or just like one other person, like it's always a really good memory and always end up having a lot of fun.
And then our 2 toughest ones are these upcoming ones, but sunset hikes or sunrise hikes?
Ooh, it's a good one. I would say sunrise hikes, just because I've been on trails before involuntarily for a sunset hike, and normally it just means that like it's getting dark, you're running out of light, and you gotta kind of like hoof it a little bit, unless that's the intention, like trying to make it to the summit for the sunset. But there's always something like so special about a sunrise hike, like, you know, a fresh start to the day, and especially starting that early, like already knocking out like a hike, like, you know, it's going to be a good day after that.
And then spring wildflowers or fall colors?
I'll probably go with spring wildflowers. Because like I said, in Montana, like once that fall hits, you know, the snow is going to be not too far behind it. So, but when you see those spring wildflowers, you know, it's getting a little warmer, more trails are going to be accessible. So it kind of has that light at the end of the tunnel, you know.
Now, the last one is, do you prefer a steep climb or long distance?
Definitely long distance. I learned that the hard way on Mount Fuji. That steep climb was definitely not fun. And if I could take the easier route, I will do it without a doubt.
Well, that was it, Charles, for the this or that questions. For folks that want to follow your adventures along on social media, where are some of the spots that they could find you at?
Yeah, so I have just like a main personal account just called Charles Graves 2112. And I just recently started my hiking account, just like an outdoor travel adventures. It's called Hiking Dose. So you can follow me there. I'm kind of playing a little bit of catch up with some of the previous posts I've done on my personal. So you'll see some of the stuff leading up to it. And then eventually I'll catch up and I'll be able to do both hand in hand. But that's where you can find me.
And we'll be sure to put the Instagram handles on the episode show notes so people can follow along. Charles, it has been a blast talking to you about your experiences. Looking forward to what 2025 has to offer, and really appreciate your years of service for our country and your continued service. I know you're going to be there in Japan for 2 years, but thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your experiences.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Charles. We extend our heartfelt thanks to him for coming on the podcast. Make sure to follow his adventures on Instagram at Charles_Graves2112 and at hiking_dose. Also, don't forget to check out the episode show notes to learn more. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the winter months, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday with occasional bonus episodes on Friday. To ensure you never miss out on these thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to check out our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminoutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminoutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.